Today we're talking about the film Samba Traoré. It's directed by Burkina Faso filmmaker Idris Odraogo. I believe that's how it's pronounced. And he recently passed away. I believe it was near 2020, or maybe a bit before that. But he was quite a notable African film director that I had not really heard about prior to looking up a bit of his films. So, yeah. And a few of his films are on Canopy that I'm able to get through my public library system, which is nice. And yeah, that's how I found this film, Samba Traoré. The film works so well, and I really have to applaud his filmmaking at this because the film is a very simple moral tale. The very first scene of the film, and it even says in the log line here, he held up a gas station and unintentionally killed its attendant. And then he comes back to his small town and he has a bunch of money and he's not telling everybody where he gets the money from. Yeah, conflict arises from that. The way that this movie is not only filmed but acted, and the way it portrays just like the community is really cool to see. And the fact that all of the characters, they're very matter of fact. I talked last week about Eagle versus Shark. Taika Waititi, he uses the matter of factness of the characters as like character quirks, where in New Zealand it's just people saying their true feelings for the sake of like the absurdity of it. But this film, it's very much stripped down. It's in a very rural area. There's the one scene at the beginning that takes place in the city, but that's the only scene that takes place in the city. And the matter of factness in all the characters saying what they really feel, except for the main character, who of course is kind of hiding the secret of where he got the money the entire time. It's cool to see because the stripped down nature of the location and the characters gets you to focus in on the relationships between the characters, and the fact that the one big lie in the film is that he's hiding that he has this cash. And that's kind of why the film works. It really, the fact that the very first scene of this film is the actual robbery taking place. And he didn't actually kill anybody in the robbery. Him and somebody else, they went to rob a gas station. The attendant shot his friend, and then he got away with the money by holding the attendant at gunpoint. And that's the very first scene of the film. This first scene establishes this violence, and it lingers throughout the entire film. And throughout the film, he's trying to build back his reputation. He's been like the golden child of the community. He left to go to the city, and now he's coming back with all this money, and everybody's treating him with such praise. He's just trying to use this money to do good for this village. If that scene at the very beginning of him robbing the gas station was not at the very beginning, then all of these good deeds would have been less impactful. Because this violence and this act lingers throughout the film, you know that it's going to come crashing down. The fact that throughout the film, he's building all of this up, and that lingers, and you know that there is going to be an eventual downfall. Everything that he's doing, some of the lies that he's telling, especially to his best friend, whenever his new wife is questioning him on where he gets the money, and he gets upset about that, all of those things, you know, are going to come back and haunt him, and he's a character who you're not really rooting for. But I think that throughout the movie, at points, you're definitely not rooting for him, because yeah, he's rude to his wife occasionally when he's like saying where he's not saying where he got the money from. He's lying to people, but then it's also contrasted with these good deeds that he's trying to do for everybody else. And so the character study is very interesting because he probably sees himself as this Robin Hood, because this film very subtly portrays the city life as a bad thing. The very first scene, it's very crowded, it's very dark, it's very red, which is just like, yeah, the color of blood, the color of violence. And this violent act happens in the city. Given the context of he left his small village to go to the city, the story is kind of telling that the city, the evilness, the wickedness of the city is lingering on him as he goes back. And it changed him from this small town lad who goes to the city and he gets all corrupt. But it really is treating the city as this enemy that is changing him and changing his brain. So you're kind of seeing in the big picture that he may see himself as somebody doing good and trying to help his community, but you can't really root for him throughout the film because you know what he did. That being said, about the story, yes, it's a very moral tale. It's a very simple tale, and it's a thriller that is very, very engaging. And like, it's a narrative that modern audiences who may not dive into some African cinema or like Idris Odraogo cinema, it's a very accessible story, and that was very nice to see. And along with that story, you just get such insight into those communities and such a different portrayal of this story. Crime narratives are very engaging to modern audiences. People love crime shows. People love crime movies. And this is just a twist on the crime genre in this African landscape. And the story itself is going to be engaging for anybody. And yeah, I would just highly, highly recommend everybody to go watch this. And yeah, again, it's very simple. The story is very simple. It's straightforward, very easy to follow. But there's just some small nuggets of brilliance with his character and the community of characters around him. All of the characters that are built in this film are very, very memorable and very distinct in the way that they're interacting and how they're just portrayed in relation to the protagonist. So you have characters like his new wife. You have characters like his best friend and his best friend's wife, who kind of treats his best friend as like just a silly guy. They always make fun of him, and he's like more the fun-loving. He always laughs and jokes around with his friend, and he jokes around with everybody. And then, honestly, one of my favorite characters out of them all is his new wife's son, Ali. And throughout the film, you kind of see him as this, almost as an outcast. He's on his own very often. When everybody's out working, maybe he's just like sitting by a lake, having a stick and just poking at something. He's shown one time in a tree while like somebody's coming to town, and he's just like sitting there in a tree. And then near the end of the film, I still won't go into spoilers, he does this thing where his character is a driving force into bringing some characters back together. And the innocence of his character and the backstory of his character is very subtly and well developed as to like the backstory, as in where his father comes from, and just his family backstory, because he is the son of Samba's new wife. His character is really, really interesting, especially in like the last third of the film. He does a lot, and I think he definitely is part of the heart of the film, because of what he represents in relation to the city, to his age as in innocence, and just some of the shots of him just like being in that environment and just not being old enough to do what everybody else is doing, and being like there isn't too many childs. I know there's a scene where like a bunch of them are playing soccer, but he's very much shown on his own a lot. And it's very impactful and very interesting to see him in relation to the protagonist and how he views the protagonist. Last few things that I want to touch on here is just the way that the movie is shot. And the movie is absolutely beautifully shot. It shows off the landscape and just the small village vibe really, really well. And the cinematography is very pulled back, but there's a lot of depth to every single shot that's in the film. I feel like any shot of this film could be a still. Like, I'm just going to go to any part here. Yeah, all of the environments feel so lively. And then some of the landscapes are just so beautiful. Like this shot here. Yeah, look at that depth with the foreground of all of these huts, and then the background, you see the skyline there, and you see the character right in the middle. This, of course, framed beautifully. Like, yeah, just you see so much of the land in this movie. All these villages, people coming, this line in the dirt going at the line where all the people are moving. Every frame in this film, it's very different from Hollywood filmmaking. It's just, I love just place a camera, get some wide shots of everything happening, and just all of these frames are absolutely beautifully done. Some of these night scenes, just like the oranges that are coming out and like making it feel warm, because this is the scene where he builds a bar, and it's supposed to be a warm, friendly environment, and it works so well. And like I said, building the community, the crowds, everything. Like, I could take any shot of this film, and it just looks so beautiful. What a nice looking film. And man, it just, there's not too much motion with the cameras. There's a bit with like a few pans and dollies here and there. In general, just showcasing the landscape, the colors, and the depth to all the shots are just so masterfully done. And yeah, just huge props to Idrissa here. And the last thing I'll say, going into a bit of spoilers now, I'll just touch on a few of the spoilers. Yes, I said before, it is a very simple story. When things start to come crash down, there are some very quiet moments that are very impactful and actually like pull the story together. Crime is such a, in film, it's a very high energy, and I feel like a lot of superhero movies nowadays portray criminals as like fast talking, like one-liner, get in, get out kind of job. Some of the things at the end here, like I really, really love the moment where he ditches his wife when she needs to give birth, and everybody's like, oh, she can't give birth here, she has to go to the city, but he can't go back to the city, so he ditches her. And then he goes back to his bar that he built, and he's all alone, and he's just sitting there, and he's drinking, and he smashes a bottle. The space that he built for the community that's supposed to be about friendship and connection. And now everybody is off with his wife about to deliver his baby, and he's there all alone. And it's showing that location that he built with the money that he stole, that the community is not rooted in the location, it's rooted in the people. And all the people that he cared about are on that wagon, helping her go to the city to give birth. And I thought, yeah, that scene was that was my favorite scene of the film. It was so impactful. Like, just the beautiful irony that she was actually able to give birth when he left and not actually in the city, just on the way to the city. It's like almost, he was almost like the virus, a part of that group, and then he left, and then she was finally able, now that he's gone, to give birth and bring this child into the world. It's kind of showing that like the city guy was kind of just like the infection in this community, and his actions, his just like, yeah, the crime that he committed, he was invading the community as a virus does and spreading like his wealth everywhere. He's trying to be like the man of the community and building all these things for the community. And it's just showing that, yeah, that it was more of an infection rather than like a helping hand that he was giving everybody. It just made everything so much more satisfying in that way. And there's also just some other like quieter moments that are really, really well done. And just like the fact that they were saying that their dialogue is very matter of fact, it can still provide some emotional moments. Whereas like when the cops are finally coming for him in the end, his friend, before he goes to warn him, and before they come to get him, he's like, why didn't you tell me about this? I'm your best friend. We had this heart-to-heart earlier on when we were drunk. The friend feels betrayed, even though he still runs off with him and tries to help him escape and gets shot in the gunfire. And it's like, that friend really, he was really rooting for his friend Samba to go to the city and be successful, because he always feels in himself that he's not as successful. He doesn't have a family. There's that quiet moment where he talks to the guy who was the owner of the cart that was helping drive the pregnant wife to the city. There was a moment where they're just off to the side and they talk, and the guy's like, I have 10 kids and it's so much work having kids, and then the friend is like, oh, I don't have any kids. Unfortunately, I can't. And then that's the moment where the baby is born, and they look back, they hear the sound of the baby being born, and they're like, wow, that's beautiful. And it's like such a small moment that I was like, why are we having this aside with two side characters? But it was a really, really special moment that was created right there. And it was like, yeah, it's just some of the small moments in this simple story are just so well made. Some of the quieter moments. Yeah, this movie, just like the more I think about it, I like it a lot more. And I would highly, highly recommend anybody to watch this movie. It's not very long. It's 85 minutes. Like I said, I found it through my local library on Canopy. I believe, yeah, this one that I was skimming through, it's just a copy of it on YouTube. The subtitles are in French for that version. Yeah, the one I found on Canopy had some English subtitles. Samba Traoré, very happy that I watched it. Would highly, highly recommend. It's a crime film that is actually quite funny as well. There's a lot of funny moments, especially with his best friend. He's a really great character. All the characters in this movie are so distinct, so well made. The landscapes are beautiful. It's a simple story that you can get attached to. A moral story. Yeah, I can't sing its praises enough. It's a great movie. All right, next week we're going to watch Near Dark. from 1987, a Catherine Bigelow vampire movie that you don't know much about.